We're always told that the brain can change, but for those of us in that FND community or functional neurological disorder, the word neuroplasticity can feel like a buzzword that doesn't really work for us because it's kind of confusing. So today I am reacting to none other Dr. Andrew Huberman's legendary breakdown of how the brain actually rewires itself. You curious? We're actually going to look at why a child's brain specifically is so different from ours adult, and more importantly, how adversity, this very thing that we didn't ask for with FND, can be the chemical trigger we need to build more resilient nervous system. So if you feel like your software is glitching because of FND, this video might be the manual to start thinking about and acting on how to fix it. So let's dive in. Hi, my name is Dr. Lee. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in pediatric health psychology and the founder of Teen FND Academy, an online coaching program to help teens with FND and their parents to get their lives back. If you're new to this channel, welcome, and please make sure to subscribe and hit like button and share this video with others to spread the awareness of FND. So without further ado, let's look into this video together. I am going to start with the basics, like what is the brain and then how the brain is connected to the body. Let's start from there.
Yeah, so the brain and nervous system, so it's like brain, spinal cord, connections with the body and back again. I don't distinguish between brain and mind. I think that's like a 80s discussion or earlier. And I think it would take us down the wrong track. So brain or mind to me is interchangeable. Mind body is kind of interchangeable because the brain is connected to the body and the body's connected to the brain, right? If I, pinprick my hand and it hurts, my brain registers it, where it happens. It's kind of an irrelevant discussion now. I think we really need to just appreciate that the nervous system is designed to orchestrate all the processes in the body, not just thinking and not just behavior.
Okay, so I want to plug in here. Literally, this is exactly what I talk about all the time when I talk about FND. So what is FND? FND is a miscommunication between the brain and the body. So many times, if a doctor says to you that FND is just all in your head, that right there is really the kind of starting on the wrong foot, because like what he's talking about, the brain and the body are connected. So you can't just have like one or the other. As long as you are alive, like you can see me, the brain and the body and the head and the body are connected. It's really about you have to think this whole body as a whole person thing. So anyway.
It really can be divided into 5 things. So there's sensation, and sensation is really bound or restricted by the receptors in the body. So receptors in the eye that perceive photons, light energy, receptors in the skin that perceive pressure, touch receptors, smell, taste, hearing, etc. And the interesting thing about sensation and the fact that the nervous system needs to pay attention to sensation is it's non-negotiable. The nervous system of humans is designed to extract physical phenomenon from the universe that are non-negotiable, photons of light. I can't see in the infrared with my eyes, and I can't see ultraviolet light with my eyes. And I can't perceive that because I don't have the receptors for it. So other animals can perceive some of those things, but that leads us to the next thing, which is perception, which is which sensations are you paying attention to? So all the time you're sensing things. Like right now, your feet are sensing the contact with your shoes.
Okay, really quick. In a healthy brain and a body, like all of us, the brain is always scanning for a threat or perceived threat. And the body cannot tell difference between the real versus perceived threat. So I'm just going to lump it as a threat using clues like attention, right? Like what are you paying attention to in that moment? And the memory. Is this familiar? Did we have this experience before? And also thinking, do I like it? Do I not like it? Or feeling, because thoughts and feeling always go together. Because if you're thinking about something, whether you like it or not, you are also experiencing some sort of emotion, whether it's a content or feeling chill, that is also a type of feeling. I'm so glad that he's talking about the perception.
But you're not thinking about it until I say that. And then you shift your perception. Right. So perception is like this spotlight. So the brain wants to constantly bring in sensation. It's non-negotiable what's coming in. It's just dependent on your environment. Perception is negotiable. You can control that because I just said shoes and you thought about your feet and there you are.
Okay, so I don't mean to speak over what he's talking about, but once you start paying attention to something, then the energy sort of flows and then that spotlight becomes stronger and bigger and really more intense. And that is partially why the part of the brain called the reticular activation system, also known as RAS, R-A-S, is also activated. And I'm pretty sure he talks about RAS all the time, not particularly in this video. Well, let's go.
You are. Then there are feelings, which can be a little bit nebulous, but feelings are a link between our emotion and it generally invokes the body, sensations in the body and concepts in the mind of what those sensations are about. That's really what emotions are. Animals definitely experience them. I'm kind of appalled to think that 10 years ago, people were like, do animals have emotions? Of course they have emotions, right? Because those are bodily sensations merged with some perception. So of course they do. And then there's thoughts. And thoughts are interesting because thoughts happen spontaneously. Think about like a web browser that's constantly giving you pop-ups. But thoughts can also be deliberate. So you and I can decide right now that we're gonna think about a plan for something, or we're gonna think about what's going on in the world. So thoughts happen spontaneously and they can be deliberate. And then the final thing is behaviors and actions. So the nervous system is responsible for sensation, perception, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. And what's interesting, you start to think about that as you're like, okay, that's a lot, but what is the nervous system really trying to accomplish? Like on any given day or at any moment, what's it trying to accomplish? And it's really trying to accomplish one thing, which is to take perceptions of the outside world and merge those with perceptions of the inside world, what we call interoception, and to link those in a way that's operating on our environment in the appropriate way. So what do I mean by that? So if I'm feeling anxious and I'm in a very calm environment, I'm going to perceive that rapid heart rate and kind of feeling of agitation in my body as inappropriate for the moment. Right. And my goal then as an organism is to adjust my level of what they call autonomic arousal or alertness down. If I'm in.
So this is what I talk about, that the resetting the autonomic nervous system, right? So that's exactly what he's talking about, what he's experiencing outside of the body and also inside the body. Are they matching? Literally, FND is the miscommunication of the brain and the body that also includes what's happening around them may or may not be matching with what's happening inside of them. So this is partially why that when your child is just sitting on the couch, happy, chill, relax, and then suddenly having that episode, and then you're wondering, well, we were told that there has to be a stress trigger or something that is really difficult to trigger that episode of FND. And no, my daughter was just fine. And there's no stress. There's no anxiety. There's like no trauma, like right in that moment. So it doesn't make sense. Well, there you have it. FND is the miscommunication of brain and the body, and sometimes and many times the immediate trigger, immediate stress, immediate whatever anxiety provoking situation may or may not need to be there. And in fact, in order for anyone to get the diagnosis of FND, the newest DSM basically got rid of the stress has to be present. So it has nothing to do with that. Now, opposite side is it, can you actually have a stress and that could be related to FND? Yes, you can. But what I'm saying is that FND doesn't have to be always triggered by stress, anxiety, and trauma and things like that.
If I'm at a great party, or I'm at a wedding, or it's a celebration, or I'm at a protest, or, then I might feel that my level of alertness is appropriate for my environment. So the nervous system is in this constant dynamic interaction with the outside world and trying to figure that out. One way that this can be kind of conceptualized is there's an emerging idea that's kind of interesting about impatience. So
a little bit of a side note before we jump to the next conversation about neuroplasticity. I really wish Dr. Huberman talk about FND because come on, he's a neuroscientist, right? He's so interested in the brain neuroscience and the psychology, and what is more interesting than FND. So if you, Dr. Huberman, happens to be watching this video for some miracle reason, I am happy to come to your podcast and talk about FND. So here's my crossing fingers, okay?
Things that just occur without our conscious awareness.
Well, I think that, in terms of value of understanding the nervous system and where it can be steered, it's absolutely clear that the nervous system can change in response to experience. So this thing we call neuroplasticity is really that. It's the brain's ability to modify itself in response to experience. And I think it's important to understand that from birth till about age 25, the brain is extremely malleable.
Okay, that's it right there. Neuroplasticity is the ability to change, right? So anyone is possible, particularly for pediatric population, like my kind of people, birth through the age of 25. And then he's going to talk about why. In
a kind of almost passive way where kids are exposed to things and the brain is just wiring up. I mean, the brain is really designed to adjust itself in order to be in concert with its surroundings. And to optimize that, just the way we described it a minute
Like
ago.
the way that a child can learn a language very quickly
Or 3 languages.
play the guitar or something like that.
Yeah, without an accent.
Right.
3 languages without an accent. It's remarkable. You try and do that after age 25. It's very challenging.
Okay, so I'm going to plug in here for a little bit. I talk about neuroplasticity a lot with the families who are in my program, Teen FNA Academy. And in fact, parents are required to be part of the program for my program, Teen FNA Academy. Why? Because of this. Passive neuroplasticity is what it's called. So kids are in that environment and they're like a sponge. They're constantly observing what's happening around them, whether they like it or not. And so when they are surrounded by the people who are like-minded, in good, bad, right, or wrong, it doesn't matter. The child can act like them. So that's just a given thing. So if you think about it, in terms of the recovering from FND, do you think this is a good idea for your child and yourself to be surrounded by the people who are like-minded, solution-oriented focus rather than symptom-oriented focus? Meaning they're having these really struggling experiences and just talking about how hard this is, sort of like a one-upping on who is having harder time. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. You have a choice in which party you want to belong to. And it also goes back to parents. If you are trained on how to refocus your attention and perception towards recovery with calm, steady leadership rather than constant reaction and chaos with no guidance, what do you think is going to happen to your child? And this is why it's so important. And actually, parents, you are the biggest influencer for your child because your child spends more time at home with you in that home environment.
And so the brain is basically designed to be customized in the early part of life and then to implement those algorithms and that circuitry for the rest of its life. And so the brain can change in adulthood, and it can change provided that there's an emphasis on some perceptual event. So in other words, if you want to change your brain as an adult, let's say you want to be less anxious, you want to learn a new language, you want to be more functional in some way, presumably.
Including FND?
The key thing is to bring focus to some particular perception of something that's happening during the learning process.
So that perception maybe has been, what's happening with my body? Oh, I am about to have an episode. Oh my God, this is not good. I don't like it. All of those focus, attention, thinking, and memory and feeling, right? So you can change manually as an adult to a different perception, what is focusing on the brain retraining, like what he's saying. So I'm not saying if you're an adult and hit 25, you're doom and gloom. Hardly. But you have to put more effort consciously towards recovery, if that is what you want.
And the reason for that is that there's a neurochemical system involving acetylcholine. And it comes from these 2 little nuclei down in the base of the brain called nucleus basalis. All day long, you're doing things in a reflexive way. But when you do something and you think about it very intensely, acetylcholine is released from basalis at the precise neurons that were involved in that behavior.
Okay, in 3rd grade language, because this can be, he can get into really nitty gritty, right? So sometimes I just want to make sure that you all understand this. So acetylcholine is a basically brain chemical that activates, that like basically is a spotlight. Like, oh, okay, I need to pay attention to something. Oh, I need to be activated. Oh, I need to do something. So that is basically like action cells, if you can remember that.
And it marks those for change during sleep or during deep rest later. So for people that want to change their brain, the power of focus is really the entry point, and the ability to access deep rest and sleep. Because most people don't realize this, but neuroplasticity is triggered by intense focus. But neuroplasticity occurs during deep sleep and rest.
Okay, I know he talks about sleep in this super long podcast, which I'm not going to get into today, but part of the program, Teen FND Academy, definitely covers sleep, because sleep is not only the time to rest, but also time to reset and time to actually the change to happen. So if your sleep is not that great, even though you might be having like sleep hours, the quality may not be great, or you're having a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up in the morning, or being consistent, that is matching with your daily routine, then that is also a place for you to focus on intentionally towards recovery
and rest. And we can talk about how to optimize those different brain functions. One of the things that's really important also to think about how the brain works in terms of plasticity and all this stuff is what the brain really wants to do is also pass as much of what it does off to reflexive behavior as possible.
So this is where I also talk about the ratio of 5-to-1 rule. What does that mean? Automatically, we think about something that is not working, that is 1. Like, oh, I am still not feeling good, or oh, I had this symptom again, right? Oh, these symptoms are so unpredictable, all of these things. Your job is not to get rid of it, but your job is to actually add 5 more things manually, because this is autopilot that we need to have to survive. So this is not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. We all do this, whether we have FND or not. That's 1. And then 5 thing is the manual of, so this could be the reflexive behavior as he's talking about. And this is a manual effort, attention-focused behavior. And I am practicing the skills and strategies to get better, right? And my version of progress is to be able to use the skills and strategies regardless of whether a symptom happens or not. Or another one would be, and I was able to get up today, or I was able to get out of bed today, or I was able to have fun with my friends today. So you see, like, you're not getting rid of this one thing, but then the 5 things you're adding manually to shift your attention again, the reticular activation system and retraining your brain, neuroplasticity, all of those things. This has to be done manually with effort. So if you're thinking, yeah, but I still think about this. Yes, that is absolutely normal situation to something that you didn't ask for. And then your job is to manually add this. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, 5 is too much, okay, start with 1 or 2, right? That is so much better than at 0. And then again, you might continue to go back to, yeah, this is working, but I'm still not better. You're gonna go through back and forth while you're going through that neuroplasticity, the changing your brain. So keep practicing manually and then make this a habit. Okay.
So when we're talking about focus, I think it can get a little bit vague, but it might be useful to think about, like, what exactly is focus and what triggers plasticity. So the brain loves to be able to just do things, pick up coffee cups and drink and walk and talk and do things and not put much energy into it. When we decide to focus, what the brain really does is it switches on a set of circuits that involve the frontal cortex and nucleus basalis and some others, and it's trying to understand duration, how long something's going to last, path, what's going to happen, and outcome, what ultimately is going to happen. So duration, path, and outcome. The events of early 2020 are a good example of this. One of the reasons why it's so exhausting to be alive in 2020 is because we are now having to pay attention to duration, path, and outcome. How long is this thing going to last? When are they going to open up all businesses? Did I touch that door handle? Does it matter?
Right.
Who are the experts? Are there?
Okay. So this is a good also example of, if you are feeling, been there, done that. I did this few times, couple times, and it feel like forever and it's not working. That's exactly what he is talking about, even though he's not talking about FND. And this talk definitely applies to FND situation. So now I'm going to shift a little bit and talk about the adversity part.
My lab, we study fear, we study courage, we study resilience, and we study the underlying neurochemical substrates for those. So we had a bunch of guys there, a couple team guys, some other folks, and we bring them in this little room and we do virtual reality there. And one of the things that we use to scare people or to generate a sense of autonomic arousal is this experience of diving with great white sharks, which of course you're not in water in the laboratory, but it's very immersive. And for people that are afraid of sharks, it can be quite scary. not always, but we also have heights, we have claustrophobia, we got something where you can feel spiders crawling all over your body if you're an arachnophobe. We, if you have a pain point, we find it.
Do you spend time trying to figure out what that pain point is?
We do, and we do it through some very covert methodology that involves AI and some fun tools.
A bunch of weird questions that, right, all right.
Let's just say this, from the moment you step into our laboratory, we're studying you. So now I know. And yeah, exactly. So what was fun was, so I sort of explained what the platform was and what we were going to do. And David said, he goes, I don't like sharks. And I was like, all right, well. And so then, this was not a typical experimental day in the lab. So I just kind of, at one point I finished describing what the tech is and how we're going to wire people in. And then I said, so who wants to go first? And he's like, I'll go.
Right, of course.
And what was funny to me at that moment, I realized this is interesting because he was very explicit about the fact that he didn't like sharks. He was very explicit about the fact that he was going to be first man in. I mean, it would be inappropriate for me to describe his data, right? And we didn't do a full-blown experiment. But what I can say is whatever it is that David has figured out how to do, it clearly involves taking whatever adrenaline pulse he feels and understanding something fundamental to biology, which is that adrenaline response was designed to move us, not to keep us stationary. He uses behavior as the way to shift sensation, perception, feelings, and thoughts. He understands how to run that program in the right direction. Whereas most people, when they don't like what they feel, they start negotiating sensation, which will never work. They start trying to control their perception, which is hard, right? They're like, oh, I'm not going to think about that, or I'll think about it differently. Very hard to control the mind with the mind.
Yes, so I see this all the time. Whenever you're fearful of having FND symptoms or flare-ups and association that you have, well, school was stressful and this is only place I have symptoms. And therefore, every time I think about school, this is not good. And the way to overcome that normally is either avoid, okay, so school is bad, so let's not go to school, and then let's take a break and then rest until you get better. And then you can go back again. Never really is a great way to do that, especially for FND. Or try to negotiate or control, like with the mind. So let's not think about it. Let's distract ourselves, which again, doesn't really work.
With the mind. He knows that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Feelings, Lord knows what those are and how to control them. I mean, we'll eventually figure that out as a field, but thoughts are complicated. So he just goes immediately to action. Immediately
right
to
towards
action.
It. So when he says, just for clarity, when he says, I don't like sharks, he's basically saying, put me in the shark tank. Like he's cueing you to say, this is the thing I'm afraid of, and I'm going to be the first one to volunteer. And I know you're going to put me in the shark tank if I tell you that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, and I obviously can't speak for him, but one of the things I think is very clear is that he's tapped into this neuroplasticity process through the portal of agitation and stress. He's figured out, and this is really the holy grail of neuroscience, is how can I modify my brain? Well, you modify it by placing yourself into discomfort and using that as a propeller to move you into action.
This is exactly what I talk about. Yes, having symptoms, flare-ups, and these quote-unquote setbacks are so hard. You don't ask for it because it's something that you want to get out of. And also at the same time, this is the uncomfortable situation that you can take advantage to yourself to propel to move into the direction of recovery.
About sensation, perception, feeling, thought, and behavior. Actually, the way to control our nervous system and feel the way we want to feel is to run that backwards. Behavior, thoughts. So if you change your behavior, then generally your thoughts, your feelings, and your perceptions change.
Yeah.
And everyone tries to come at it from the other end, but he's figured out through whatever process led him there and incredible life circumstances, how to run it in this direction of behavior first.
Yeah.
And I really think that if neuroscience has anything to offer, it's some understanding of what the underlying chemicals and neural circuits are. But the sooner that the human species can start to understand that our feelings and our thoughts and our memories and all that is very complicated, but that when behaviors are very concrete and they are the control panel for the rest of it. I don't want to relegate feelings. Feelings are extremely important.
Okay, so I want to plug in here that when it comes to FND recovery specifically, starting from the ground up, like the bottom up approach of getting ready and understanding the physical sensation and perception, like the physical perception, not just about, oh my gosh, the episode is about to happen or the flare up is about to come. It is more about how am I feeling? Simple body scan, right? Like how is my breathing? That kind of ground up approach is really starting with that behavior. And also, even if this is uncomfortable, I am going to create no more 0 day, which I talk about a lot in my program, Teen FNE Academy, of how to start with minimal commitment, even though that might mean getting out of bed for today, right? So this is again starting from the behavior and taking the action and really having that adversity, like this friction of, yeah, I don't like this, this is uncomfortable, I'm a little bit fearful. Use that to your advantage to build resilience, because when you are able to overcome just a little bit, again, low, right, duration, path, and outcome with baby steps, then you're basically depositing the cash of the golden nugget of what it's called win. Like, oh, I was able to do that. And when you start collecting those wins, and that becomes confidence. Confidence makes you also feel like you can challenge a little bit more. And that is how you can move forward. I am going to link this super long podcast, but huge views in my description box below. And also, if you are thinking about, okay, now I know the neuroplasticity, how that might work to my FND recovery, and taking action is really important. What is really helpful for you is to start working on those plans with strategy and guidance. So if you think that is something you are missing, then you might be a good fit for Teen FNE Academy. Link is down below to find more information. But otherwise, keep watching my videos on my channel. That is completely free. And there are so many nuggets on those videos that you might find it helpful. Now, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video.